So welcome everybody, my name is Paul, and if you know my channel, I talk a lot about the transition that we're going through and esoteric subjects and ancient mysteries. And one of the biggest ancient mysteries, of course, we have probably learned about is why are there so many civilizations and ancient buildings that were just devastated? It's all gone. It's just a collapsed civilization like Egypt. Huge blocks and statues just thrown down and everything was like, what happened there? Well, if you study enough history and you learn there's been a lot of catastrophes on this planet, and regional and widespread and so on, of various kinds. And when we live in our current life, we go through this process. We get up in our morning and we go through our day and we go to our job or whatever, and we don't really think about these big catastrophes. And yet, as especially now, today is May 8th, May 7th, 2022, and there's a tremendous number of societal things that are going on that it's really hard not to be conscious of something going on here. And it's been talked about for quite a while, but the momentum of distraction that people have going about their business and watching movies and going to games and so on, generally society has not paid much attention to the fact that yes, even though you didn't wake up on the morning on 2012, 2013 or whatever, and boom, everything was all different or end of the world. No, that's not how it happens. And not all hoopla was made by the media anyway. But the fact is that there are times when there are drastic, immediate, sudden catastrophes. And right now, we tend to have a global scale of observation because we are exposed to the internet and we can see pictures and videos from all over the world. But once upon a time, let's say in a civilization around the Mediterranean Sea, and most of the people had no idea what was beyond the Straits of Gibraltar or anything, and that was their world. That was their sort of like civilization around the Mediterranean. And once upon a time, we know from all the stories that something happened on the planet, maybe something far away from the Mediterranean, maybe in the Atlantic Ocean, maybe something, who knows what it was, but it caused a tremendous amount of flooding and just washed through the Mediterranean Sea and destroyed a whole lot of cities that were along the coastline. Now, for them, that was the end of the world, and it's possible that probably people survived in other parts of the world, like way up in the mountains, and the people who live in a rural life way up in the mountains tend to survive a lot of these catastrophes because they're not near the ocean, where a lot of the damage is. So, it's pretty obvious to most of us by now that we're going through a catastrophe situation, but it's like a slow-moving train wreck. Our civilization is morphing. It has to morph. At some point, it's an organism. Society, the human population on Earth is like a hive. It's just sort of it's an organic thing. It just kind of moves along and changes and gets into all different things and gets distorted this way and that. But essentially, the life forces of the divine, the creator, there's an imprint, there's a tendency for that creator. If you look at nature, you say, somewhere in that creative force, it just loves beauty. It just makes so many beautiful things. It makes so many beautiful lives and different kinds of creatures of all kinds. So there's an underlying quantum field of energy and motion and things that are beyond our scope of perception that is moving society along, moving the earth along through its millions and millions of years, and eventually the product of that awesome force, call it God or whatever, the product of that is just utter beauty and the highest kind of technology, the bodies and all the different planets and solar systems, and it's just incredible. And we're all part of that. And one of the problems that human beings have is we hold on to the past, we hold on to our views, and sooner or later things change. Even concrete will crack, and if you leave it long enough, after a while the plants will go right through the concrete and goodbye concrete. There's some powerful force that is moving us along, and we need to cooperate with it esoterically. Now, you might there's a whole discussion now about good and evil. Yes, there is good. Good evolves the soul. Good brings us joy. Bad keeps us from having the joy. So on that scale, yes, there's a human component of good and bad, and minds get in the way and everything and interfere with that beautiful, awesome unfolding of the flower of life, the human civilization, the planets, the whole creation is just unfolding. So human beings, evil, nasty people, the usual suspects I call them, get in the way of that unfoldment. But there is the old saying, turn within, because within they can't touch that. They can't touch our inner experience of our divine. When we have a touch with that, then we start cooperating with that process that's making everything gorgeous and beautiful and everything full of joy. And it's important to be somewhat malleable, somewhat open, and somewhat flexible about the concepts that we have about our life, because believe me, the history of our world that we've been told is there's a whole lot more, obviously. A lot more. We get the tiniest fragments. A long time ago, people didn't write down very much history. They didn't really have books, and they wrote on tablets, and there's a lot of them that haven't even been translated yet. And in places like India, where they didn't have the technology, they would make temples, they would use math and geometry, but they had oral stories, and they told these stories again and again and again with certain intonation of voices to imprint the impression of reality through the vibration. Now, our internet is very vulnerable. I mean, if the right solar flare happened and we had all our computers crash, we don't have electricity, how are we going to record? There's going to be no record. There's just going to be a lot of old buildings that, like we see now, and who the hell built those things? We don't know, but I don't know how to do it. So that battle of good and evil is going on, and it's really the polarity. See, creation offers there's a unity of the unity, and then there's the forces of positive and negative. There's just a polarity. Forget good, bad, evil, whatever. Just the polarity of the friction, the interaction. Without the polarity, there wouldn't be a whole lot of chemistry, or nothing would happen. So in some senses, that divine, omnipresent union, oneness of all, has to have a left arm and a right arm, you might say, that kind of mixes it up and starts molding things. Just like when you're on a potting wheel or something, you use both your hands, you use all these tools. It's kind of like that thing is spinning and spinning and spinning, and then you just kind of do things with it, and then you mold it. Well, this earth is spinning, the whole creation is moving, and you might say that we get to cooperate in that process of being on the positive side of making those beautiful designs and beautiful shapes in our world, manifesting through our own creativity. And it's very important that we start creating, because when forces of nature are so powerful that they're just irresistible, on some level, the whole creation has to respond to certain impulses. That if a star explodes somewhere, if our star were to explode or blast off, which it does, I mean, the whole solar system, everything's going to get affected. And one thing we just don't think about a lot is the sun. I urge people to investigate what's going on with the sun right now, and over the cycles of the sun, and how it affects our climate, and how it affects the mystical aspects of it. The sun is radiating being of a cosmic kind, and it just emanates. All the emanations from the sun is not just random. There's information encoded in that. There's frequency. There's information embedded in the creation that is what they call the Akashic records, or the endless ripples of what goes on in the world and the society, and everything gets somehow embedded in creation, and then it just is a part of the fabric of the universe, because it can't go anywhere. All that vibration and activity that's been happening for thousands and thousands of years is just like a pond. It's never totally still. If you look underneath the water, that every rock that is thrown in there, it just creates all these little vibrations, and the fish moving creates vibrations. So even though the surface of the pond might look extremely calm, you still have tremendous amount of activity going on in that pond. And think of our society, our whole earth is one big system, okay? One grand system. And we have the human dimension, we have the animal kingdoms, we have the insects, we have the birds, we have the reptiles, we have fish, we have all these different things, and all that is really important, because it's all one really essential element. Imagine if we didn't have bugs. I mean, the trash would there would be no decomposition at all. That wouldn't be very good. Now, our planet, the the way society works is very strange in me, and not just society, but I just watched a cat one time kill a rabbit, and like it didn't even eat the rabbit. Like why is that going on? Why does the cat have to kill the rabbit? And what is it? The rabbits have no defense except to run and hide under the ground, and they're just meat for somebody, for a bunch of animals. They provide a lot of food for foxes and whatever. And why is that? It's sort of weird in a way. We're human beings, we consume food and we eat things, and we don't think about that, if we eat a cow, for example, like someone had to kill that cow and take it apart and everything. It's kind of weird in a way that's just what life is like. We plant a bunch of crops that are all thriving and lively, and then we just cut them all down, and we cut our grass. We don't let that grow either. So it's a very strange part of society and creation that we participate in. Now, our true being and the knowledge of our own self is part of that oneness. So in a sense, we are really the witness. What we really are, our own consciousness, is not identified with a particular body. This is what the mystics say about it. You learn, you feel, there's a oneness here, okay? What I identify with, you can identify with anything. You can be Bozo the Clown if you want, put on a costume and pretend to identify with it, but that's not who you really are. Our true nature is not a body or a personality. We have the opportunity to use it and then set it aside and be the witness and the impersonal, non-reacting witness. Because that's essentially what the divine is. The divine, the ultimate divine consciousness, the imperishable, the Satchitanand, it's just a neutral observer. There's nothing outside of it. There's nothing beyond it. It's just one entity. And essentially, we need to learn the union of our own being so that we can have harmony outside in our world, including not just our relationships, but in the way we conduct our lives and we create food and for ourselves and sustain ourselves. So I don't want to make these videos too long, and I want people to just look in different directions, start looking into the esoteric aspects of their own existence, and just know thyself is the oldest saying, and it applies on a wider scale too, because society, as a culture, a country, we need to know who we are. What do we stand for? There's a lot of debate right now in the world, like people, there's the nasties, the usual suspects are trying to herd us all into something and control us, and that's their own concept of that's the way they want. I mean, there's like a bunch of their hobby is controlling people and things. That's what they do, and they identify with their power and their money and everything. And those people, they have their function in the society, but they don't have a lasting function because they're identified with something nasty and cruel and greedy and everything, and that's just not nature. You see, nature is generous. Nature just keeps giving, giving, giving. Nature is trying to control everything and make every leaf just exactly the same and every person just exactly the same. That's what nature tolerates, a tremendous amount of diversity. But the usual suspects and the nasties don't, so we don't need to listen to those people. Now, touching briefly on the subject of health, I don't want to get into that too much because I don't want to be thrown off my channel here, but internal guidance, practical common sense. I can tell you what I did. 2 years, I started listening and I said, something is really, really screwy here. Because I don't know, man. I don't know. Something's screwy. As soon as they started talking about this way back over 2 years ago, I said, these are the same people who told us about the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and all that stuff. And you know how we're talking about. So I kind of took a different path. I said, no, there's not. I'm not going to be wearing a mask the rest of my life. No, no way. That's not what I'm going to do. There's all kinds of illnesses. I grew up in India where there's tuberculosis and typhoid and all kinds of things. We got a few little vaccines. That's it. 5 or 6. That's it. Once a year. Now, my immune system is really, really good, and I think that, look, when it comes down to trusting my immune system and somebody who's told me a lot of lies over my life, then I think, what I'm going to be doing. So I'm a perfect example of having no masks, no vax, no testing, No, I just lived a normal life last 2.5 years. I live in a rural area. I eat well. I take care of myself. I had no illness and no problemos in all this time. So the same reasoning I apply to a lot of other stuff that I'm told about everything, about the wars, about what's going on. There's a lot of just total BS out there, and we all know it. We got to stop listening to it and get into some knowledge of our own being. That's the real esoteric part of this whole thing, that whatever goes on in our life, in the near life, and around our immediate circumstances, or what goes on in society, it can all be turned into a lesson of how we tap into our own resources and build our relationships with people and get more self-reliant and get more confident in ourselves and lose the fear and increase the joy. Everything that's going on in our life can be turned into some kind of a growth and transformation lesson. I joke about sometimes where I'm 69 years old and I'm a rounded stone now. See, like when I was younger, I was like had all these little pointy sides and like maybe I would annoy some people, but over the years you just get a little humbler, and the water of life just kind of like streams over you and wears you down. And you go, okay, I'll be a little sphere, just a little smooth, a little warm. I'm not going to offend anybody, hopefully not deliberately, and just go through life like aerodynamic plane or something, like a UFO. Just okay, well, I'll just have no resistance. Just I'm shaped in the right way. Just no problems, no doubts, no fears, no anxieties. So let me check my notes here, make sure I got everything I wanted to talk about here. The incarnation of souls. Now, this is a really big subject here, and I've talked a bit about it, but incarnating on this planet right now, there's a reason for a big population, okay? If you said, okay, if you look at it from the point of view where right now on Earth, there's an absolute incredible opportunity for every soul. There's enlightenment being offered. There's communication. All your friends and family are out there being incarnated. Even your pets are there. And take birth on the planet right now and get it on with the rest of and go through this beautiful, beautiful transition and be part of it and do some service and grow and have a fantastic experience of this life. That's why there's good reason to have lots of people on this planet. Now is the time for us to transform. We need, if we keep people from coming here, we're all going to leave sooner or later. But, we all know deep down that, we don't need to be so selfish and greedy. And, we could live a different way in society and have much less waste and plenty for everybody and lots of space. If you fly around like I do sometimes, you look around, there's millions and millions and millions of square miles of open space, and they're all just people concentrating in cities and arguing with each other and causing each other big problems and costing a lot of money to live there. And these big sky towers loaded with electricity and wireless and 5G and all that. Why not get out in the country? I'm a realtor. I live out in the country for a reason, because I've been to plenty of cities. I've been to Bangkok, New Delhi, London, New York, Detroit. I've been to all the big cities, and that's why I live right here in the country in Virginia, because there's food here, there's water here, there's sunshine, there's a milder climate. It's not extreme. We do have all the seasons, so that's beautiful. But we have a pace of life and the common sense of the people. The people around the world who lasted the longest are people who lived in a rural area. And even to this day, in many parts of the world, there are still people living a certain way, and they've lived that way for so many years. And our civilization gone up and down, and they're still living that way. So take a little note from it. They built their own houses, they got their own food, they raised their own food, they kept with their families, they bonded together, they learned how to solve emotional issues between people, and frankly, smaller groups are a little bit more amenable to a harmonious culture. So, we need a little tribe, you might say. So, let me just check my notes once again and make sure I cover everything. I did cover another video. I know we're going to have some food shortages, and I think we're over-consuming anyway. And if you go to any big thrift store, any big city, you'll see tons and tons of stuff. Like there's cars, trucks, motorcycles, boats, farm machinery just sitting on the side of the road, just wasting away. Worst case scenario, we probably even still have some gas in it. The other day I saw a video about someone started up it was a 100-year-old tractor. 100 years old, hadn't been started in decades, and they just started that sucker up. So, there's a lot of resources that we have available to us that we don't think about very much. I personally, over my lifetime, bought a lot of used things because it recycles things and it saves a lot of money, especially when my kids were younger. I bought used clothing. I recycle things. Reuse things, and there's tons and tons of resources out there. People have garages full of equipment and tools and machines and chainsaws and everything. They just don't use them very often. So again, I turn to getting self-reliance, having a homestead, having resources, making bonds with other people, sharing information, because there's a lot of people who are going to be dragged through this who are just going to be not very they're just going to react in a really bad way, especially in some of the big cities. So I suggest people start thinking about bonding with other people and getting allies, because nobody can do everything. You can't. Not everybody can be a doctor, but you can have somebody in your little tribe or community that knows a lot about medicine and has some training. That way we can all share. And the people that have that kind of expertise, maybe they need someone who can build their house or something like that. So thanks for listening. I appreciate it very much. Like and share. I watch a lot of other people's content, and if you watch my playlist, you'll see I try to recommend people just go into ancient history, look at ancient Tartaria, past civilizations, Egypt. Learn how other people and other cultures went through transitions, big transitions. And it's not a joke. I mean, people have ridiculed me in some ways, and people like me talking about the big transition. And I've always said, it's not just one day you wake up in the morning and, oh my God, did the calendar change and boom, the whole planet's new. It's not going to happen like that. The transition between the ages happens over several hundred years. I think about the Renaissance. In the late 1700s, 1800s, you started to see an acceleration of technology from the steam engines and all that into electricity and light bulbs and so on. And now we're way, and there's even thousands of secret patents that we don't even get access to. So there's stuff that we don't even have yet that we could have. And that's another whole subject. But thanks again for listening. Please like and share and subscribe if you like, and come back and visit, and hope to see you in some of my other videos.